Alrighty everyone, welcome back to everything great and bad about Spider-Man. Now this is a series I want to make covering every theatrical releases on a certain character. I did something like this for the CW Flash with Grant Gustin, and today I want to make this video covering every theatrical release of Spider-Man. And I'll also be covering that YouTube Spider-Man movie, but that'll be later. Now I'm going to treat this review a bit differently. I'm not going to compare them, I'm just going to rank their movies and the way that I see fit. A lot of these Spider-Men tend to break up with their love interest too many times, and not every one of them had a conclusion to their franchise, so I'm not really going to touch upon their girlfriends either. Most of the time in superhero projects, I really don't like when there's a girlfriend or boyfriend introduced, mainly because most of the time it's done really badly. And if you think I'm joking, then look no further than a video game or movie featuring Spider-Man. I'm gonna shit on some of these movies here in a minute, but I do have to give credit where credit is due. Spider-Man really does get people's butts in theaters, even if the movies are pretty bad. But there's a lot of debate on who are the four superheroes that make up the Mount Rushmore of fictional superheroes. There's a lot of debate that the fourth one should be like the Flash or Captain America or whoever, but there's no doubt that the top three are Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. Not exactly in that order, but the point is everyone knows who Spider-Man is and everyone can get behind a really good Spider-Man project. But anyway, now it's time to talk about everything great and everything bad about Spider-Man. Starting off with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Now to start off with, I think that these three movies, even though the franchise was not done, does make this the first really solid superhero trilogy. Now my problems with this trilogy is that I don't really like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man. Like, I think he made a pretty good Peter Parker, but beyond this point, every actor who took on the mantle of playing Spider-Man did a really good job in being very charismatic with their Spider-Man counterpart. It just isn't done very well here because he's not very charming as Spider-Man.
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
And there are a lot of actors in here that are doing a really good job, so it immediately catches your eye whenever someone is not given such a good performance. Another thing I don't like is the fact that these movies started off the trend of shitting on Peter Parker way too much. Like, even when fans make movies with Spider-Man, the whole narrative revolves around Peter Parker being really sad and not being able to have a normal scene with somebody, and they just keep shitting on him throughout these movies, and I really don't like that. Also, I should mention the Mary Jane and Peter Parker romance is probably the worst romance take I've ever seen in a movie in general. Mary Jane is so fucking manipulative, and they keep breaking up and getting back together, and then she asks her boyfriend to kiss her like Spider-Man kissed her. Pretty much every movie has a mandated love interest, but I really don't ever have a good time enjoying it. And I'm going to stop talking about their romance because the same issues I just touched up on are prevalent in every single one of these movies. One thing I never understood was the fact that a bunch of people tend to believe that these first two movies are some sort of holy grail and that the third one is the worst in the trilogy. But if you ever watch these back to back, they're the same freaking movie. The plot in all three of these movies goes exactly like this. Peter Parker is the main hero, then we cut to the villain going through their rushed character arc because we just gotta get out of the way. Then bad boy and good guy meet by just pure coincidence, which I just say as a joke because this happens in every movie ever made. Then bad guy and good guy fight, good guy loses the first fight, then good guy wins and bad guy dies. So what I'm really trying to say here is that I can't really agree with the group of people that think the first two Spider-Man movies are some sort of holy grail, but then say the third one is bad, mainly because it's the only movie to have two villains instead of your usual one. Well, technically three. And that brings me to my next point. Neither one of these movies have a good conclusion because they're all the same. I mean it. Every single one of these movies has the same ending. Peter Parker always loses somebody close to him in every single one of these movies. It pisses me off because though yes, the franchise wasn't done, but it's just the same ending every single time. I just like a good conclusion showing like good closure for Spider-Man, but no, that doesn't happen. God forbid our main character has something good happen happen in one of these movies. I'm not going to talk about the narrative too much because all of you know how these movies go. Also, before I forget, I really don't like the fact that his webs come out of his body.
That came out of you.
Yeah. You can't do that, huh?
No.
I'm not going to hate on this because even when he does get his powers, this cute scene of him trying to get his webs to shoot actually does make up for his webs coming out of his body. I think this is a really good thing. I really liked it. And whenever he starts losing his powers in the second movie, that depressive episode he's going through is amplified by him not being able to shoot webs as opposed to just running out of webs in his web shooters. That's pretty cool. I kind of like that. The corniness and jokes and shit to me make these movies kind of hard to rewatch because the corniness, while it seemed intentional, does make these movies feel like a product of their time and they don't hold up in comparison to future Spider-Man movies. Like, I know you guys love Sam Raimi, but I know you guys didn't like Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness because of how campy and cheesy it was. But you love the Tobey Maguire trilogies because they're cheesy and campy. So while this may be the millionth time you've heard someone say this about this Spider-Man trilogy, people aren't really saying this out of hate, but people also aren't saying this out of nowhere. But I do give a bit of leeway to these movies because that's just how most early 2000 movies went. All in all, I talked more shit about this trilogy than good, but this trilogy is honestly pretty solid. Now it's time to get through the most disrespectful Spider-Man movies ever made. The Amazing Spider-Man movies. Yay. I don't think I'm gonna shock anyone by saying that these Spider-Man movies freaking blow. First one's okay, but don't even get me started on the second one.
You're a fraud, Spider-Man!
Now, the major red flags in these movies are present in the very first scene of the first movie, and that is that these movies put way too much emphasis on his parents. Now, just listen to me and let me ask you this. When has Peter Parker's parents ever mattered in a movie? Like, yes, parents are very important to anybody, but in a Spider-Man movie, they never mattered. And trying to get people on board that it was his destiny to become Spider-Man is something I've never enjoyed, even as a kid. Peter Parker's dad inventing the spiders that will soon make Peter Parker Spider-Man, only to soon realize it would only ever work on Peter Parker because his dad put his semen in the spiders, is fucking outrageous. I do a pretty good job in absorbing and remembering the narrative for most stuff that I watch, but the fact that this movie really thought it was a good idea to put this in the movie is ridiculous. But ignoring all that stuff, now the thing I never really liked about these movies is how it tries to tell the same stories again. Like, did they really think we would get all emotional and sad when we see Uncle Ben dying again? And I'm not even going to talk about how Uncle Ben dies because he dies in the dumbest way possible. Not only that, but the biggest failure this movie did was trying to set up the Sinister Six. And don't get me wrong, that's not a bad idea, but practically every Spider-Man project sets up the Sinister Six or has the Sinister Six in it, and that's fine, I don't care. But the problem with this is that you can't really set up the Sinister Six in movies, since there's just so many villains and character arcs to go through. You should probably only do that in a TV show or in a video game, because it never really works out. And if you try to establish each character in a movie, whether you just do it in one or in multiple movies, it's just not gonna work. And the biggest issue Spider-Man 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 had is that it just tries to juggle way too many things and it doesn't succeed in any of them. I mean, it's no coincidence the two worst Spider-Man movies suffered from the same bullshit of trying to jam all these villains in one movie, and you just can't do that. Whatever, moving on from that, in the last Spider-Man trilogy, you had some pretty good acting and you had some pretty good characters, and here you don't really get any of that.
You're not gonna get in the way of my plan, Peter Parker!
I mean, the characters and the character work are by far the worst parts of any of these movies. I never got behind any one of these characters. Peter and Gwen just keep breaking up and getting back together because we haven't seen enough of that. None of these villains are good villains either. Like, their motivations and stuff are there, but they all kind of suck.
Harry is dead!
Now, there's way too much hate on these two movies, so I'm just going to talk about these last two things and then I'll move on. But Spider-Man does not feel like a hero in any of these movies.
Just let me go.
Is that a knife? Is that a real knife?
Yes, it's a real knife.
My weakness, it's small knives.
Just let me go.
Anything but knives!
Oh, it's so simple.
Don't get me wrong, this scene is kind of funny, but he never grows out of this jackass personality. I mean, the second movie ends with Peter behaving like a jackass.
On behalf of the fine people in New York City and real rhinos everywhere, I ask you to put your mechanized paws in the air.
Typically, a superhero is a good role model for their younger audiences. We've seen in Spider-Verse how the original Peter Parker was damn near perfect. We didn't see much of him, but he tried to practically save everybody, and he left a good impression on Miles even after he was gone.
Die? No, I can't sit there and just let Spider-Man die without doing anything about it. I'm not doing that again.
I think honestly everyone, myself included, was not ready to admit that Andrew did a pretty good job as Spider-Man. But if I'm being honest, he had the most charisma and the best performance, showing expression with his body movements, and he was able to tell you exactly what his emotions were without those retractable eyes. But in that rhino chase scene, he's just being a goofball and he's wasting time while people are getting hurt. And in the first movie, he puts on his Spider-Man suit, but it's only because he wants to catch his uncle's murderer, and he lets some of these criminals go. And yes, Toby did do the exact same thing. But let's take this dinner scene for example. Captain Stacy and Peter are arguing about whether Spider-Man is a good guy or not, but then Captain Stacy says this.
This guy wears a mask like a, like an outlaw. He's hunting down a bunch of criminals that all look the same, like he's got some sort of personal vendetta. But he's not protecting innocent people, Mr. Parker.
Then Peter rebuttals and says, "Nuh-uh, Spider-Man's trying to do the right thing and help." Except at this point in the movie, we have only ever seen Spider-Man assault people. I guess he saved this woman from being mugged, but then he gets jumped, so I guess he didn't save her. Then, like I said, he's only looking for the person that killed his uncle, but if they're not the killer, then he lets them go. Now, let me ask you this. Does this sound like I just described a superhero? Does this sound like I just described Spider-Man? It's okay for our own character to think he's doing something good that obviously isn't, but Captain Stacy is right and Peter is wrong. But people don't pick up on this because this isn't what you expect from a superhero movie. We look at Deadpool and this guy has no problem telling us over and over again that he's not a good guy.
Hey, wait! You're my hero.
No. That I ain't.
And that he does not do good things, but he doesn't want anyone else to be like him, and that's eventually what these two Peters tell Tom Holland. But Spider-Man in either one of these movies does not behave like the Spider-Man that we expect him to be. Andrew Garfield obviously did his best with what was present, but I'm not blaming him for the underperformance of these movies. It's honestly none of these actors' faults, but these movies just never understood who Spider-Man was. They never understood what made Spider-Man work. If you can't get people to fucking like Spider-Man, then you are doing something very, very wrong. There has never been a Spider-Man project where people dislike Spider-Man as much as this one. I've heard a million times for the last 10 years that people only dislike Andrew Garfield's movies because they never gotten a third movie. I don't know what the hell you've been smoking, but a third movie was never reviving this franchise.
Part of the discussion was that possibly in 3 there was this idea at one point that Spider-Man would be able to take this formula and regenerate the people in his life that had died. So there was this discussion about that Captain Stacy would come back even bigger. Yeah,
if you think a third movie would save this franchise, well, I don't know what the hell to say to you. Now it's time to talk about the last thing, and you guessed it, it's the death of Gwen Stacy. Honestly, I think the chemistry between these two makes these movies a bit watchable, but like I said, they keep breaking up and whatnot, so I really don't care. So anyway, Spider-Man's finding Green Goblin Jr., and before I get started on Gwen, I hate how they handled Harry Osborn. This dude was not here in the first movie. I know that's how it happened in the Insomniac video games, but there's way more context and a much more convincing reason for why Harry wasn't in the first game. Honestly, I didn't want Gwen to die, but I'm happy she did, if I'm being honest. I watched this movie when it released in theaters. This was the first time I laughed while watching both of these movies. I just think it's so funny, and if you didn't see this coming, then you're an idiot. I'm gonna backpedal a little bit and talk about something a few other YouTubers have talked about, but the comic book that really made people lose their shit was the death of Gwen Stacy, because this comic book subverted your expectations, and this is exactly why you can't have Gwen Stacy in movies, because every Spider-Man fan knows that she's the love interest of Spider-Man that dies. Her death isn't sad because somebody died. It's sad because you didn't think that she could die. You would never in a million years think that Spider-Man would reach a point in his life this low that his girlfriend would end up dying in his hands. That's the biggest issue these movies have. It never subverted our expectations. It just tells the same story again. And Peter Parker never learns his lesson, and he never develops as a character. Basic writing tools that make characters more likable and well developed are ignored here to instead make a movie with a horrible narrative. I will give this movie credit, the effects are pretty good, and this is the only Spider-Man movie with good cinematic swinging, and that's it. That's the only credit I'm giving this movie. Anyways, time to move on. Now it's time to talk about Spider-Man Homecoming. Now everyone, including myself, likes these movies, and there's really nothing to bash on here. One thing I do appreciate is that this is the first live action Peter Parker that actually looks his fucking age. Toby kind of looked his age, and to be fair, he was in college, but Andrew Garfield does not in the slightest, and he is just way too tall and way too good looking to convince anybody that he's a fucking high schooler. Now I know actors always play characters that aren't exactly their age, but it pisses me off when we're supposed to believe these characters are in high school. And one thing I do like about Tom Holland is that he's not as tall as every other superhero. Just saying, this was the first green flag I noticed when watching this, and no offense to Spider-Man fans, but Peter Parker in general has never been super tall or anything. But so far, we're on the right track. Now this is where Spider-Man in all areas started getting good, from animation to video games to fucking movies. I think the biggest problem Spider-Man has ever had was being owned by Sony. Sony has never really ever managed Spider-Man in a good way. They just sometimes do a good job. And to make matters worse, several years ago, Sony was able to buy the rights to the whole Marvel universe, I think, but they only ended up buying the rights to Spider-Man. And I think I can speak for everyone here that that was probably for the best. To get back on track, one thing I did like about these movies is Peter Parker is pretty charismatic.
What's up, guys? You forget your PIN number?
Whoa, you're the Avengers!
Now, he's not really funny, and calling Spider-Man in general funny is kind of a stretch, but he does put on a good performance with his dialogue.
Not a girl, I'm a boy. I mean, I'm a man.
I don't care what you are, boy, girl.
I'm not a girl, I'm a man. Come on, man, look, who is selling these weapons? I need to know, give me names or else.
These movies also introduced the retractable lenses. I really do love how it looks on Spider-Man, but I really wish other superheroes would get these retractable lenses or wide eyes. Like, I always wondered how these wide eyes would look like on, say, Batman, Flash, Green Lantern. I mean, I would have preferred wide eyes over those fucking contacts. But the point is that the retractable lenses are something I always been a fan of. The narrative is also pretty solid. Spider-Man having a best friend kind of worked out really well. The love interest keeps going back and forth, and I honestly don't mind it in these movies. I think it's actually handled very well. Michael Keaton as Vulture and tying his motivations back to the first Avengers movies worked out pretty well. I actually like how Flash is not a huge punk like how he is in the other movies. Plus, Peter not beating his ass really shows his level of maturity and composure even before he's told with great power comes great responsibility. He's the only Spider-Man that wasn't seeking vengeance in the early days of his movies, and for that he gets a bunch of points on his leaderboard. Also, the first suit he gets looks really freaking funny. I can comfortably say that every single one of these Spider-Men are pretty good craftsmen, but these are one of the few projects that I've seen with Spider-Man where I actually didn't really like his suits. I think the suits have way too much tech and it has more gadgets and shit than the Insomniac Spider-Man does at times.
Hey, Suit Lady, what are they doing?
Do you want to hear what they're saying?
I can hear what they're saying.
And the biggest red flag that this movie has that's present in pretty much all of his movies is just how much his character is tethered to Iron Man. And I really do not like that.
Hey, May. How you doing? What are you wearing? Something skimpy, I hope.
Even other Marvel movies revolve around Tony Stark, even when he's not the main character. Like Captain America Civil War is a movie where the Avengers start to turn on each other, and the character with the most going on is Iron Man. I don't know, it never really sat right with me, and it will never sit right with me. But these movies do kind of make up for it in the fact that now practically everyone on the planet just forgets about Peter Parker being Spider-Man. And yeah, No Way Home is a pretty good movie. This is the only Spider-Man movie in the trilogy that I've watched in theater, and it honestly isn't bad. They definitely focus on the narrative and storytelling more than anything, and I can fully 100% respect that. That would never be something I dislike in a movie, and after 20 fucking years we finally get a movie with the Sinister Six in it. It took 2 recastings and 8 movies to get the Sinister Six all in one movie. I think I can speak for everyone. I'm glad that these movies never use the same protagonists and their sequels. You never get a recast for Green Goblin. And I mean Norman Osborn, not Harry Osborn. You never get a recast for Doc Ock, Electro, Lizard, Venom, whatever. It didn't happen. Now, one thing I will shit on these movies is I never really liked how they keep making movies about Peter Parker. Like, I'm not talking about the actors. Like, I would like a movie of Miguel O'Hara or Miles Morales, just because we have seen so much of Peter Parker already, and I'm honestly kind of getting tired of it. Anyways, that's about it for this trilogy, soon to be quadrilogy. I kinda liked it, but I hate how this character is tied so much to Iron Man. Whatever, next project. Insomniac Spider-Man. Alright, everyone can agree these games are pretty good. The second one kinda sucks narrative wise, only because it really feels like not much is going on. Instead of going through the origin story of Spider-Man, it just throws us into the universe of Insomniac Spider-Man. I fucking love these games, all 3 in fact. These games really do make the gamer feel like they're Spider-Man, and honestly, there's really not much to poke holes in. Like I said, the Sinister Six can only really be done in multiple movies, a TV show, or in a video game, and that's exactly what we got here. I love everything about these games, to the unlockable suits, even some of them teasing their future projects. I fucking love how they made Venom like 400 pounds. But I really don't like that while there was a ton of hype for the second game, the things that really made people get so hyped for in the second game are not present in the second game. Like, we're supposed to get a Carnage DLC, a Spider-Verse DLC, and I think just another DLC to continue the game. I don't know, I'll show it on screen. But those main things they got people hyped for are not in the game. There's really not much to talk about. The soundtrack goes pretty freaking crazy. The budget for this game was 100% put to full use. The character work is pretty cool, and again, it's showing us a lot of villains that don't get much spotlight. Peter Parker says some bad words.
Why don't you pop some more pills and say what you really feel?
Hey!
Anyways, now it's time for the next movie. And before I talk about the best Spider-Man movies ever made, I first have to talk about the Spider-Man YouTube movie that was released last year. Spider-Man Lotus. Yay. Now, I did say that calling Spider-Man 3 or The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was not the proper terminology, because really to me, they just feel like the weakest, not the worst. And I understand it takes a ton of miracles to make a movie happen. Countless of hours go into making a movie, and in the case of Spider-Man Lotus, this movie fucking blows. There isn't a single thing I liked about this movie. And I'm not even going to talk about the narrative because there is no narrative here. The only plot is that Gwen Stacy was alive in the beginning and then she dies, and that's what the movie is going to be about. I remember way back in the beginning of the video how I said most Spider-Man fan movies don't really let Peter Parker enjoy his life. Like, most of the first 5 movies consist of the main villain sometimes dying and their love life being a mess. That toxic trait of thinking that this is good writing and makes a Spider-Man movie good is exactly what a ton of fans thought whenever they funded the budget for this movie. Now, I'm not going to talk about the drama and shit about this movie. You can simply just refer to other YouTuber links right here. There's way too much to cover. But anyways, the movie, whether you may or may not know, was funded by a bunch of people that believe that the director's idea for this Spider-Man movie was something worth funding and something worth telling. And let me tell you something, if you've never seen this movie, don't fucking watch it. As a movie critic, review person, whatever the hell, it was kind of my job to do so. But the only reason why I bring this movie up is because of the context of this movie. This whole movie is just about Gwen Stacy dying and everyone else being really upset about it, and how Peter Parker could have saved her and that she died because of him, and how he isn't a superhero. Anyways, nothing ever happens either. That's the only bit of information that's ever going to be explained to you, and that's going to keep being explained to you. The movie relies so much on exposition to explain basic things to you, and the only part this movie succeeds in is explaining the same thing over and over and over again, and that's not something to be proud of. Now, they don't actually show Gwen Stacy dying, and I'm kind of pissed because that probably would have been the only funny part in this movie. There are ways to write a superhero suffering from their love interest dying or just someone important to them dying, but this is the only thing that most Spider-Man fans think make a movie or a narrative worth telling. And to make a 2-hour movie about losing someone is ridiculous, because what about losing someone takes 2 hours worth of explaining to do? Now, this movie was made by a guy that at the time was like 18 years of age, and I wouldn't diminish the credibility of a young amateur creator because that's not something I do on this channel, and it would never be something I would ever go out of my way to do. But there are a number of deleted screenshots that had him saying that this was going to be the best Spider-Man movie that was going to spite the MCU Spider-Man, and it fails in every single aspect that it attempts to make. Now it's finally time to talk about some great Spider-Man movies.
All right, let's do this one last time.
I don't think I'm going to be shocking anyone by saying that these are the best Spider-Man movies ever made. And not only that, I think they're the best superhero movies ever made, but that's just me. Everything that I bitched about for the last hour or whatever is not present in either two of these movies. It has a narrative that is not trying to sell us on bullshit we've seen a million times, and the lore is fucking crazy. And they show us a story that we haven't seen Spider-Man be a part of. These movies understand exactly what it means to be Spider-Man. It doesn't try to sell us on the fact that this was Miles Morales' destiny to be bitten by a spider. This really feels like some random guy just happened to get bit by a spider and he became Spider-Man. And it also shows us characters that we haven't seen on the big screen yet. The animation style is ridiculous, and showing us some art that isn't present in any movie that we have ever seen. The soundtrack and the music that were a part of these movies is fucking ridiculous. Spider-Man in all of these movies has some amazing soundtracks. I mean, just listen to this. Alright, that part went by too fast, but you get the idea. Spider-Man movies tend to have some very good music in it. I can watch these movies any day of the week and I will never get tired of it. I honestly can't believe how hooked this movie got me during the second movie. The first movie is probably the best out of the two, only because the first movie does not end on a cliffhanger. The second movie is obviously setting up something special, but it doesn't end, and that does make the first movie a little bit better. Every single Spider-Man movie that has come out before and after is forever cursed to be compared to these two movies. There is not a single thing that this movie did that was not better than the other shit that we've seen in those other movies. These two movies make the other Spider-Man movies look way worse in comparison because they blow in comparison to these. And what made me really fall in love in the first movie was the very iconic "stop sticking, please keep sticking" scene. This is one scene that I've been begging for in a live action movie featuring Spider-Man, and just the narrative of the wrong guy getting bit from a spider from a different universe is ridiculous and it's amazing. I don't know who thought about it, but it's amazing and I love it. The fact that the destiny of these two Spider-Men were swapped because of some testing shit with Alchemax makes this reveal the best evil polar opposite counterparts that I've ever seen in a movie or a TV show. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised I didn't see this coming, because once you rewatch it, you'll be like, oh yeah, I should have seen that coming. But there are things I didn't like about these movies, so let's just get that shit out of the way. First off, the one thing I never really understood was how Gwen Stacy was already there before the super collider blew up. Like, I thought they all came through their respective portals because Peter Parker got his face slammed in there. Secondly, there's this weird scene where all the other Spider-Men start beating the shit out of Miles because they don't believe he's ready, and he's the only one that's singled out of all of them. Yeah, don't single out the guy wearing two different shoes on his feet. Instead, single out the only Spider-Man that has his suit in one piece. Yeah, that makes sense. Thirdly, this movie has a really bad time transitioning between scenes sometimes. Like in one scene, we'll see Miles see the reveal of his uncle being the Prowler, which was a pretty good plot twist, by the way. And then this happens. Also, Jake Johnson, the guy who plays Peter B. Parker, is fucking hilarious.
Because you know what? No matter how many times I get hit, I always get back up.
But he's just thrown into the second movie for literally no reason. Oh, and you know how in the second movie how Pavitra Pravatra's dimension starts to get swallowed up? We're shown that this is a canon event, that Spider-Man is just supposed to lose someone important to him. Whether it's a captain, whether it's their uncle, or whether it's Gwen. The point is, these movies establish that these things are just bound to happen. And the second movie makes Miles Morales ask the question, do I need that trauma to become Spider-Man? We see his world start to get swallowed up by a black hole immediately, but in the first movie, we don't see the world of Miles Morales get destroyed at all. I mean, that code thing spreading across the city would technically be the same, but it's not getting destroyed is where I'm getting at. And obviously Miguel says he's the only one that's been holding it all together, but that was at the end of the movie. You didn't address the problem the minute that it happened. So why isn't the Earth of 1610 getting corrupt or have a black hole, or why isn't it getting swallowed up? This isn't really even a problem to me, it just had me scratching my head. Another thing that kind of bothered me is Miguel says to Miles that he has to endure the pain of having his father die, and he's not asking Miles, he's telling Miles like, dude, your dad's gonna die and you have to let him die. But then he says that's the job, and you know, that's what you sign up for, but he didn't sign up for it. A spider bit him and he met the original Peter Parker before he died, and he swore to destroy the super collider. But then he says you're not supposed to be Spider-Man.
There's a world out there with no Spider-Man to protect them because it bit you instead. No, you're not supposed to be Spider-Man.
So which is it? Huh? Is he supposed to be Spider-Man or is he not supposed to be Spider-Man? Fucking tell me. Another thing I did not like in the slightest were the motivations of Miguel O'Hara. So the motivations of Miguel are how, well, he tried to live a life with a family that was from another dimension and he was allegedly happy, and then the world started to get destroyed, even though you saw what happened to Earth 1610 and you still went ahead and thought it was a good idea to go to another universe and do the same thing you ridiculed Miles about. And we know this because we've seen Miguel O'Hara be all skinny and not juicing up with that Ravager shit yet. Then he's all buff now, so this means that yes, he saw what happened to Miles' world and still went ahead and did the same thing that Miles accidentally did, but you did that shit on purpose. Another thing too is that it's really fucking weird for Miguel to do that. Like, why would you ever want to raise a daughter that you've never met and that you didn't have? It's just weird to me how he thought this was a good idea, and it's weird how he gave that thought the time of day, you know? That's weird to me because I think he's really cool, but his motivations fucking suck. Also, another thing you might realize is that there's quite a bit of animation hiccups. They're not really mistakes, they're just hiccups. Like the swinging physics at times is really bad because sometimes the Spider-Man tend to swing onto things that are not above them at all, and that does happen in Sam Raimi's movies, but there's a logical reason for how Toby did it. All jokes aside, the swinging physics at times is just really bad. It's not horrible, like I've seen way worse, but this movie also at times has shots where they were just trying to get this shit done as fast as possible. Like the other Spider-Man in the Spider Society have some pretty bland costume designs, and sometimes they just put shadows over them to just cover them up. And again, like with the swinging, like in this train chase scene, is really cool, don't get me wrong, but again, his web is in this moon-based railway tunnel fucking thing, and then it's outside. That shit just bugs me. Alright, I get it. Not everything's perfect. And the animation hiccups don't even come close to outweighing the animation greatness. Like for a minute, I thought Miles was going to try and stop this fucking train. But nah, he just jumps off. Seriously, everything this movie does, it succeeds in. Everyone says the all station stop Spider-Man scene is the best scene, but it has to be the Nueva York train chase scene. And listen, these two scenes and really the last hour of this movie is what makes you realize, oh, that's why it took 4 years and over 1,000 animators to make this movie. It goes insanely hard. This movie also features a cameo from Leland Tyler Wayne, or better known as The fact that every single one of these scenes were hand drawn is a level of detail that fucking scares me. Now, the last two things that bug me is the fact that Hobie was pretty much everyone's favorite character, and he's the only other character that wasn't really on board with the idea that we should let people die. I just wish there was more of him and Miguel. I want to see them two have their own movie, honestly. Now, to be fair, these two look like they were the worst to animate. Like in the beginning, whenever Miguel gets introduced, his introduction is perfect, first of all. Like we see he doesn't have a spider sense. He's not charming like everyone else. He doesn't even shoot webs, he fucking shoots cables. And he can't climb walls without his claws and those blade things on his forearm. I love all that shit. But whenever I saw that cape, I was like, there's no freaking way that they would ever animate that cape. This movie also has some very strange details for Miguel O'Hara.
Whoa. Whoa! What?
Now lastly, the one thing that did bug me is while the music at times really does have you on the edge of your seat, whenever all of this is mushed together, it kind of makes for some really bad audio mixing. All in all, these are the best Spider-Man movies. The holes that I poked in them don't outweigh the fucking greatness of them. They're amazing. Now it's time to rank and rate all of them. Honestly, I give the whole Sam Raimi trilogy a 7 out of 10. It's okay, but it doesn't hold up. That goes there, that there, and that's That's alright. The Amazing Spider-Man 1 is like a 5 or 6. It's okay. Now the Amazing Spider-Man 2 is like a 2 or 3. It's very bad. Actually, no, I'll put it right there. I honestly don't hate it as much as everyone else does. Spider-Man Homecoming is like an 8 or 10. I don't really think it's a goated, to be fair. I don't think one of these are goated, I'm being honest. Far From Home is like a 7 or 8. It's good. This isn't in order, by the way. Now, No Way Home, if you saw it in theaters, it's a 10, but it goes down to an 8 once you try to rewatch it because it's not rewatchable at all. But it was a pretty good movie, so it deserves a spot there. I give Spider-Man Lotus a fucking 0.5 out of 10. The only thing I liked was the drama behind it, and that wasn't even good drama. It would go all the way down here if it went that far, but it doesn't. Into the Spider-Verse was a 10. Across the Spider-Verse was, it's not a 10. It's fucking, you know what? Oh man, I don't know. You know what? I'll put it up there. It was actually pretty fucking good. Alright guys, that's every single Spider-Man movie ranked in the order that I see fit. And honestly, I think it makes for a pretty good video. This is definitely my longest video that I have ever put on this channel. This took a lot out of me. I'm not gonna lie. This took forever to fucking edit. Alright guys, that's about it. Alright, bye.